Welcome to The Critique. Today, we are breaking down a really high-voltage television interview with MK Tali Gotliv on Channel 14. It covers everything from Prime Minister Netanyahu's resilience to a hostage rescue to the war in Gaza. So let's get to work.
Let's dive in. I've spent a lot of time with this transcript, and, high voltage is definitely the right word for it. It's frantic.
It is, but I think energy without direction is just noise. The first major issue we need to tackle here falls under the lens of structure and flow.
I felt that immediately.
Yeah?
Reading through it, it felt like a stream of consciousness experiment. I mean, it was incredibly difficult to track where one argument ended and the next one even began.
Exactly. So the material, it suffers significantly from a lack of transitional signposting.
Right.
And this results in a delivery that just obscures her primary arguments, the legal ones, the political ones, because the listener is just too busy trying to figure out what's happening.
It creates a sort of cognitive whiplash. You're moving along one track, and then suddenly the train just jumps the rails.
The weakness here is that she jumps so rapidly between these disparate topics: Netanyahu's emotional state, her own court cross-examination, Donald Trump, tactical details of a rescue.
With no bridges between them.
None.
There's a perfect example right at the start. She's discussing the prime minister, saying he can finally breathe. He's dealing with demons. A metaphorical political point.
Sure.
But then, in the blink of an eye, we are deep into a story about a 5-hour cross-examination she had to endure.
About a protester named Eagle Rambam.
Yeah.
Right. And because there's no bridge, the listener just stops and asks, wait, why are we talking about you now? It feels jarring. It's self-referential instead of supportive of the main point.
It completely dilutes the defense of Netanyahu.
It does.
Because it suddenly becomes a story about her Tuesday afternoon.
I assume the intent was to draw some kind of parallel, like he's persecuted and I am also being persecuted?
That has to be it. But without that bridge, the listener doesn't hear a parallel. They just hear a tangent.
So how do we fix this? Because you don't want to cut the content necessarily. That story about the cross-examination is actually kind of interesting on its own.
It is.
The suggestion for improvement is to implement these clear paragraph breaks in the spoken rhetoric, to compartmentalize the arguments.
Okay.
She needs to finish one thought complete, like the Rafa operate, before she pivots to a personal grievance. And when she does pivot, she has to signpost.
So she has to explicitly tell the audience why she's changing the subject.
Precisely. Let's look at a concrete example for improvement. Currently, she moves from the demons Netanyahu faces directly into the story about the lawyer question.
It's instantaneous. It's like, he is breathing, I was interrogated last week.
Yeah, the proposed fix is to use a specific bridging phrase, connect the personal to the political. She could say something like, I understand the immense pressure the prime minister is under because, on a much smaller scale, I faced similar harassment in court just last week.
Oh, that is so much cleaner.
Right?
It contextualizes the anecdote. It becomes evidence of a broader systemic issue, what she calls the judicial coup, rather than just a random story.
Exactly. It signals to the listener, I am telling you this story about me to prove a point about him. That is the signposting that's completely missing.
And it transforms the anecdote from just a distraction into a piece of evidence. It respects the listener's attention.
It guides them through the argument instead of just, dragging them through it. And it prevents the listener from dismissing her as self-absorbed.
That's a really helpful distinction. Now, once we get past the structure, we have to talk about the language itself, because the tone here is incredibly aggressive.
That brings us to our second critique. And we'll view this one through the lens of rhetorical precision and credibility.
There's certainly no shortage of fire in this text. I mean, she goes after Yair Golan very, very hard.
She does, but the reliance on these extreme, hyperbolic criminal accusations against political opponents, it just undermines her authority as a legal expert.
That's the irony, isn't it? She is a lawyer. She has the background. But when I read this, I don't hear a lawyer at all. I hear a very angry partisan.
She calls him a criminal, a traitor, a despicable man.
And she explicitly mentions the death penalty.
Yeah, the weakness is using terms like traitor and death penalty without any legal grounding in the immediate context. It might energize her base, but it creates a real boy who cried wolf.
If everything's a capital offense, then nothing is.
Accusing Yair Golan of crimes punishable by death for what? Defeatist propaganda? Or comparing protesters to Nazis?
It just creates so much noise. Any legitimate legal point she might have is just completely lost.
It creates a wall. If I'm a listener who's maybe on the fence and she starts screaming about the death penalty, I just tune out.
You assume she's just exaggerating for effect.
And that is a tragedy for her own argument, because as a legislator, she has the tools to do this so differently.
So, how should she be handling this? If we look at it from the perspective of her professional expertise.
Well, the suggestion for improvement is to leverage her background as a lawyer, provide a forensic dissection of his actions rather than just resorting to name-calling.
Okay, what does she say?
She needs to indict him, not insult. The proposed fix is to explain exactly which clause of the Penal Code on wartime conduct she believes was violated.
So she puts on the prosecutor's hat.
Yes, and she frames it like this. When a public figure encourages refusal of service during an active conflict, it meets the legal definition of sedition under Article X, because it directly degrades our operational capacity.
Wow, that is infinitely more powerful. It transforms a shout into a real legal argument.
It does.
It makes the listener think, oh, wait, did he actually break the law? Rather than, oh, she's just angry again.
It creates an aura of objectivity around what is a highly subjective political attack. It validates her authority instead of eroding it.
It uses her unique selling point, her legal mind, instead of just ignoring it. It also forces the opponent to respond to the law, not just the tone. It elevates the entire discourse.
Precisely. Now, moving on, there's a section in here about the hostage rescue that I found really narratively frustrating.
This is the part about the recovery of Ranguivili's body.
It's a huge moment in the text.
It is, but this brings us to our third critique, balancing conspiracy with strategy.
I really felt like the significance of that rescue just got lost.
It did.
The entanglement of a legitimate military success story with these conspiracy-adjacent political theories, it just dilutes the impact of the good news.
That's so clear in the text. She talks about the incredible intelligence work, finding the body in 4 different locations, pulling the terrorists out of Gaza.
Amazing stuff.
But then, almost in the same breath, she starts attacking the media for questioning the timing of it.
The weakness is that juxtaposition. She discusses a moment of national unity and real military achievement, which should stand on its own, but she sandwiches it between attacks on the media and claims about the deep state.
It's a whiplash moment. She says, look at this incredible heroism, and then immediately the media is terrible for asking if the timing was political. By focusing on the media's reaction, she actually takes the spotlight off the soldiers.
Exactly. By contrasting the complexity of the rescue with a rant about the news cycle, the focus shifts from the heroism of the soldiers to the pettiness of politics. The deep state narrative eats the military victim.
And isn't there a risk that by focusing on the media critique, she just looks defensive? Like she's more worried about the headline than the rescue itself?
It absolutely does. So the suggestion for improvement here is to isolate the military victim, make them standalone segments. She needs to treat the heroism and the treason as totally separate narrative tracks.
So give the win some breathing room.
Validate the military achievement fully before you pivot to the media critique.
Okay, so a concrete example. Currently, she mentions the intelligence work, but immediately pivots to, is it a coincidence we found him before Rafah? The media cynical?
The proposed fix is to devote a full minute solely to the mechanics of that operation. Talk about the extraction of the terrorist, the interrogation, the mapping of the 4 sites. Let the listener just marvel at the IDF's capability.
That sounds much more compelling. You're building up the awe.
Exactly. Then and only then do you start a new section. Call it the cynicism of the media. Say, now look at how the media treated this miracle.
Ah.
Don't mix the two, because it cheapens the soldier's sacrifice to use it as a shield against bad press.
It also makes the attack on the media stronger, because you've just established how hard and how incredible the operation was. You build the pedestal before you complain about someone trying to knock it over.
Correct. It respects the gravity of the event. And speaking of gravity, we need to discuss the ending of this transcript. It has maybe the most visceral content, but I would argue it's completely misplaced.
You mean the visit to the Abu Kabir Forensic Institute?
Yes. This leads to our final critique, focused on emotional resonance and humanization.
That section was haunting. She describes the smell, the sights, the Zaka teams. It was really the only time in the whole text where I felt she dropped the political persona and just spoke like a human being.
The topic sentence here is that the most powerful emotional segment, that visit to Abu Kabir, is buried at the very end of the interview, and that reduces its potential to frame the moral necessity of the war.
I wondered about that placement. She spends, 15 minutes shouting about Yair Golan and the deep state and Trump, and then ends with this profound, quiet horror. It feels like an afterthought.
The weakness is exactly that. By placing this humanizing, unifying moment at the tail end, it feels like a footnote. It comes after all that aggressive political combat, so the listener is likely already exhausted or polarized by the time they even get there.
It's interesting. If she had started with that, it would have changed the entire context of everything that followed.
That is the suggestion for improvement. Invert the structure. Use the visceral experience at Abu Kabir as the opening hook. Make it the central anchor for the entire interview.
That's a fascinating idea. So instead of starting with Netanyahu is finally breathing, she starts with I just smelled death.
Let's look at the concrete example. Currently, the interview ends with a thank you to the forensic staff. It's polite, but it's a fade out.
Right. A standard sign-off.
The proposed fix is to open the discussion on Gaza with this experience. Imagine if the first thing she said was something like, I just came from Abu Kabir. I saw what these monsters did. The smell is still on my clothes, and that is why I cannot accept a ceasefire.
Wow, that hits hard. It immediately justifies everything else she is about to say.
It grounds her subsequent hardline political stances in a tangible, shared trauma, not just abstract ideology. It makes her anger feel righteous, instead of just political.
It also makes it much harder for an opponent to argue with her. You can argue with a political opinion. You can't really argue with someone describing the smell of a forensic institute.
Exactly. It establishes moral high ground. Instant. By burying it at the end, she wasted her most potent ammunition.
It really highlights how structure just dictates impact. You can have all the right ingredients, but if you put the dessert first and the appetizer last, the meal doesn't work.
That's a perfect analogy. We are looking at a piece of material here that has passion, it has information, and it has a very distinct voice.
It does?
But it's disorganized. And that disorganization is costing the speaker convert. She's preaching to the converted because the structure doesn't allow anyone else to enter the narrative.
And she's losing credibility by relying on hyperbole when she has the tools, the legal knowledge, the military intel, to make a much more sophisticated case.
Correct. So let's recap the main points for a listener to take away.
Lay them out for us.
We have 4 actionable suggestions today. First, use signposting to cure that stream of consciousness flow. Don't make the listener guess how your personal story connects to the national news.
Tell them explicitly with bridging phrases. Connect the dots.
Second, replace hyperbolic insults with specific legal argument. If you're a lawyer, sound like one. Don't call someone a traitor. Explain which statute they violated.
Precision over volume.
Third, separate the military victories from the political conspiracy theory. Give the win its moment in the sun. Discuss the heroism fully before you pivot to attacking the media.
Don't dilute the success. Let the good news stand alone.
And finally, move the emotional core to the forefront. If you have a story as powerful as the visit to the Forensic Institute, do not bury it at the end.
Use it as your opening hook.
Establish moral grounding for the hard arguments that follow.
Start with the heart, then move to the head.
These changes don't require changing her politics or her passion. They just require organizing the thoughts in a way that maximizes their impact.
And ultimately, that is what we want, for the material to be as effective as possible.
We would love to see how these adjustments change the flow of the next interview. To the listener who submitted this, please apply these structural and tonal shifts and submit the next iteration. We are ready for it.
Absolutely. We'd love to see the next draft.
That wraps up this critique. Thank you for listening.